And now, Mr. President, I have one last statement I ask to be placed in a separate part of the record as well.
Without objection.
Mr. President, for many years I've had a battle on with the tobacco lobby. It's personal. I lost my father to lung cancer when I was 14 and he was 53. I stood by his bedside for literally 100 days as he languished and ultimately died from lung cancer. He smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And when I came to the United States House of Representatives, I was determined to try to do something about the death that was being caused by tobacco products across America. I proposed a measure which seemed pretty modest at the time that banned smoking on airplane flights. It was an inconvenience and a mess to get on a plane with the so-called smoking and non-smoking section, and I thought, let's get rid of it once and for all. It was quite a battle in the House of Representatives. We passed it by a handful of votes to ban smoking on airplanes, and luckily I found a great colleague and friend, former Senator Frank Lautenberg of New Jersey, who took up the cause here on the floor of the Senate, and we banned smoking on airplanes over 25 years ago. I didn't know that it was anything more than elimination of an inconvenience while people took airplane flights. It turned out to be much, much more. It turned out to be a tipping point. People across America said, if it's unhealthy to breathe in secondhand smoke on an airplane, how about trains? How about buses? How about offices? How about hospitals? How about restaurants? At the end of the day, we know what happened. If someone walked into your home or your place of business and lit up a cigarette, you'd look at them and think, where are you from? We don't do that anymore. We certainly don't do it without asking permission. But that's what's happened in America. We had to fight the tobacco lobby every step of the way, and we've had some success. The number of young people who were using tobacco cigarette products declined dramatically, from over 20% to around 8%. We were winning the battle because these tobacco companies were recruiting our kids at an early age with a nicotine addiction that they couldn't shake later in life. Well, guess what happened? The tobacco companies invented a new product. It's called e-cigarette, or vaping. And if you think I'm making this connection up, take a look at the largest vendor of vaping devices, Juul, J-U-U-L, and look at the major shareholder of Juul, and it turns out to be Altria, which also turns out to be a major tobacco company. So now the tobacco companies decided that since kids don't gravitate toward tobacco cigarettes, they'll give them an alternative. And the alternative? An e-cigarette, a vaping device. And you know what's happened, Mr. President? In your state and in mine, high school kids are taking up this vaping addiction in numbers unimaginable. The latest reports suggest that almost 29% of high school students across the United States are currently vaping. What they're doing is using pods and flavor pods with nicotine included and using an electronic device to inhale this vapor and to blow it out. Unfortunately, in inhaling it in their lungs, they're also inhaling nicotine and developing an addiction, a terrible addiction. Students came to my office a few weeks ago and sat down. They were from New York and just asked to see me. And they said, Senator, don't kid yourself. It isn't 28 or 29%. It's over 50% of students who are vaping today. And they are desperate to buy these flavor pods and to buy these new Juul devices. When the teacher in a classroom steps out, they're all vaping right there in the classroom. They do it in the restrooms, in the classrooms, in the cafeterias, and outside the schools. And they're doing desperate things to be able to afford these devices. On September the 11th this year, President Trump and the First Lady held a press conference in the Oval Office, and though I've been critical of this president for many things, I applauded what they said. They recognized this vaping crisis, and they said, we're going to stop it. We're going to make the move necessary to make sure that these flavor pods that are enticing children are finally taken from the market. I couldn't believe my ears when I heard it. Here was President Trump stepping up to do the right thing. Perhaps he and his wife, as a father and mother of a teenager, understand this better than some. But whatever the reason, whatever the motivation, they came forward with what I thought was the best proposal: in the flavor pods once and for all. Well, after they made their announcements, the vaping industry went to work. They started buying ads on Fox, naturally, that's where the president watches television, And they started saying to the people this was unfair to take away these flavor pods. Sadly, these flavor pods, when you look at them very closely, are just an enticement for young people to use this product. Now, the vaping industry tries to argue, well, wait a minute. People who are on tobacco cigarettes ought to have vaping as an alternative. It is safer. Well, marginally it may be, if that were the end of the story. But it turns out that vaping device has also become an enticement for young people to use flavor pods and to develop this addiction to nicotine on vaping devices. It is impossible to argue that some veteran smoker of tobacco products is going to be enticed to vaping if he can buy candy flavors, bubblegum flavors, fruit flavors, or other flavors. Can you imagine some 50-year-old who's been smoking for years, Marlboros, says, man, if I could just get my hands on some unicorn milk flavor pods, I'd give up tobacco and move to e-cigarettes. We know better. These pods are designed to entice children. Well, we waited to see what would happen after the president's September announcement. We were lucky to have one of our own colleagues who is now taking the chair for the state of Utah, who was present at the meeting with the president on the issue of vaping. I salute him for his friendship and leadership on this issue. Last week, after delays, President Trump finally announced a plan to ban some of the e-cigarette flavors that are hooking our kids on nicotine. Within 30 days, some flavored e-cigarette pods and cartridges will be removed from the market. This is an important step, but it's not nearly enough. For instance, menthol pods are exempt. So I'm afraid kids are just going to move to Juul's menthol flavoring. Further, liquid e-cigarette flavors that are used in open-tank vaping devices are also exempt. The vaping shops are still in business, unaffected by this new policy of the administration. Liquid nicotine is sold in flavors like gummy bear, whipped cream, sugar cookie, unicorn milk. These flavors, definitely intended for kids, are going to stay on the market under President Trump's new policy. This week's announcement is not what the president said would happen in the Oval Office a few months ago. And that's why the public health community and this senator are so disappointed. We know the president decided to water down the e-cigarette flavor ban. Heavy lobbying by Big Tobacco and Big Vape were behind it. When announcing this new restriction, President Trump said some words which may tell the story. He said, quote, "We have to protect our families. At the same time, it's a big industry. We want to protect the industry," end of quote. Protect the vaping industry? It makes sense why these companies wanted the president to backtrack on his promise. They make a lot of money off our kids, and they addict them, and the kids spend money because of the addiction. Why doesn't it make sense for the president to stand up to Big Tobacco and Big Vaping on behalf of our kids across America? The fight's not over. Fewer than 4% of adults use e-cigarettes. 30% at least of high school kids across America are using them. Now the FDA, with a new leader, Dr. Stephen Hahn, has to come off the sidelines and do their job to protect the kids. By court order, all e-cigarette companies will have to submit applications to the Food and Drug Administration in May if they want to keep their devices or flavors on the market. If they do not submit an application in May, they'll have to come off the market immediately. The FDA must enforce this fully. For companies that do submit an application, the FDA has up to 1 year to decide whether they stay on the market. The FDA must reject the applications of any vaping products that are clearly designed to appeal to children, period. And if they're significantly used by children, they should be taken off the market. I've told Commissioner Hahn the FDA must evaluate these applications based on science, not anecdotes. What matters is that e-cigarette companies prove their health claims, which to date they have never been able to do. Do e-cigarettes actually help smokers quit cigarettes? Are they actually safe? Are they in fact just hooking children on nicotine? Those are the important questions that should be answered with science, not with politics. There are ways to preserve e-cigarette access for adult smokers without allowing an entire generation of kids to become hooked on nicotine. This means getting rid of all of the flavors, taking illegal products off the market immediately, and rejecting e-cigarette applications that fail to show a strong public health benefit. To date, the FDA has not been as active or aggressive as it should. For the sake of our children and the families who love them, it's time for the FDA to get off the sidelines and make sure that we do everything in our power, including in Congress, to make certain that this epidemic, and the FDA came up with the word, this epidemic of e-vaping and e-cigarettes comes to an end in America. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.